Hello, 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 friends, and welcome into yet another review from me, Shroud Sky Book Reviews, your destination for anything male, romance, erotica, stories, Kindle books, anything. So, we're going to be talking about today Wrong Way Home, Criminal Delights Taken. It's the first book in the series. It's a 12 anthology series, if you will, not all by the same artist, but this one, the first one, Wrong Way Home, was by K.A. Merikan, who, as you may have remembered from Where the Devil Says Goodnight, I fucking love this author and these two authors, and the way they write is phenomenal. This story is dark, it is twisted, it is phenomenal, it fills my heart with joy, even though the themes and content is fucking dark. So let's go into it. Let's start off with, again, touching on spoilers. I will be spoiling some of the plot elements. I have the most bookmarks in this book that I've ever done it before because I really wanted to get this good. So yeah, we'll be touching on some spoilers for the story, from the characters' point of view, and stuff like that. So I'm not giving you the entire book. It is quite dense at over 240-ish pages. Yeah, 250 at the end, give or take. It's pretty solid. I think it's 240 because I think the ends are like ads and stuff. But yeah, it's pretty solid. Again, it's very dark, so be warned. Trigger warnings for dark shit, like Stockholm Syndrome level dark shit. Okay? We're on the same page? Great. Colin, we're introduced with, as he's going home from college, decides to take a risk for once in his life and decides to take an alternate way home through the mountains, which ultimately upends his life forever, as we will see throughout the story review. He meets Taryn. Taryn lives alone in the woods on an inherited property left to him by his uncle and uses it as a doomsday bunker with his cats. Who would not to love so far? But when Colin drives up to Taryn's house, he is now a witness to a murder, as Taryn is just straight up killing somebody. And as he is unable to escape, Taryn captures him and throws Colin into a cage. Isn't this how all romance starts? Being thrown into a cage against your will, right? But, Colin, fearing for his life, is trying to figure out how to plan for it, and he is, like me, watches horror movies, apparently, because he's like, yeah, if I try and book it as soon as I can, I'm probably going to get caught. I got a plan, got to learn some stuff. So he's very thinking kind of rationally, despite him being scared out of his mind. And, as a result of him being missing, and the other person that, Taryn killed being missing, the cops do show up, and through this interaction, Colin learns that Taryn is mute and potentially deaf. But, since Colin magically knows sign language, I'm not saying magically, he does know sign language, and it's explained really well of why he learns sign language and why he knows it so well. He is able to communicate with Taryn and start signing to him in sign language, and then realizes Taryn can hear him, but chooses or can't speak, so he just replies in sign language. So they break up the text in this by quotes for spoken dialogue and like open caret parentheses, if you will. It's not the bracket, but it's like the caret parentheses style. It's the little V's on the side, if you will, for that. So yeah, they cover all that stuff. But yeah, and then when Colin presses Taryn to have a shower, get outside, and just kind of breathe fresh air for a minute. And so Taryn agrees, but puts Colin in a thick metal collar and chain. And then while Colin is showering, Taryn and Colin fuck. They get right on in it. And you would think, oh, it's happily ever after from there. No. Colin, in an event to try and endear himself, does everything he can to, show Taryn that he is in love, that he wants to be here, that he's not going to run, this, that, and the other. Colin eventually does something stupid and gets injured, breaks his leg, and this is where it all comes to a head. Taryn doesn't want to take him to a doctor, so he tries to set the leg himself, and he thinks he does it, but Colin is essentially not for that. He wants to go see a doctor. He was studying to be a doctor, and he knows all the things that can go wrong, essentially. So it's definitely, some tensions are rising, if you will. But, and this begins the tumultuous relationship. It does end in happily ever after, although that's a big asterisk on that, because I'll get to it at the end, if you will. But there are a lot of, I would say, sex scenes in this. There's also a lot of Dubious consent all abound this. It's definitely dubious consent all abound. Under negotiated kinks abound. Like I said, Colin gets put in a fucking collar, against his will, but gets put in a cage against his will, is very Stockholm Syndrome. So before we get into all the tropes that I've already touched on, let's go through the characters, which there are two. They're Colin and Taryn. So Colin the captive, Taryn the captor. He didn't set out to be a captor, though, Taryn specifically. I'll start with Taryn, I guess, then. He lives his life as a recluse and a mute. I believe it's due to an injury that he is unable to speak, or if he does speak, it is very hard for him to speak. He is described as big, rugged, of the earth kind of man. He's like, hardworking. He's a bear of a man, and I love that for him. He does, in an act of wanting to prove that he is genuine and actually does have fallen and has fallen for, Colin, drives Colin home after their big blowout and reveals that he has a softer side that he was just starting to show before Colin decided to break his heart. And one of the things I found interesting is that he's a doomsday prepper, which I'll touch on when we get to the kind of end, if you will, of this character's section. Colin, though, he's a college student. He was looking to be a doctor. It wasn't his ultimate goal to become a doctor. It was his parents'. He was following his family's wishes versus what he wants for himself. He knows when to resist Taryn and when to pull back to save his life with this captive situation. And during this, he delivers a big sucker punch that causes Taryn to let him leave. Essentially, Colin uses Taryn for sex and openly says, "I don't love you. I just wanted to get off, and you have a dick. And I will never love you." And essentially then Taryn just says, "Okay, fine, leave." But then realizes that it's not fair and not right that he forces Colin to walk. So that's why he then, drives him to his familial home. And that's where the big culmination of the, revelation of their feelings together. Colin decides to go stay with Taryn, and they live happily ever after. But with that happily ever after comes an asterisk, as I don't know if this book predicted the future, but I'm saying it predicted the future. This was copywritten in 2019. I was going to say it's published in 2019 for that fact as well. It may not have been, but this ends in a disaster that is beneficial to Taryn because he is a doomsday prepper. Apparently there's a disease that went from cows to humans and it's wiping out the population in mass. It doesn't cover that, but it's how the end happens after they're happily ever after. They get wind of, oh, shit hit the fan. I'm glad we got the bunker. But overall, these characters, Taryn is dark. He is dark, brooding, and loving, and I love him. This, again, is not for the faint of heart. I thoroughly enjoyed this, though. I love these kind of tropes, which we'll get into here in a moment. So, help! I have been captured by these wonderful, wonderful tropes. So, obviously, we have the enemies to lovers. They're not friends by any means. And the fact that, Colin is now witness to a murder and Taryn is his captor is definitely enemies, I would say. And then they also have the whole Stockholm Syndrome thing. Colin and Taryn are clearly against each other, even during their first time doing it. It's a power play on Colin's end to endear himself to Taryn, as to not get killed and maybe earn some more favors, like being able to go outside, being able to breathe fresh air. He's being fed and watered by Taryn. He's not being starved and tortured, but he's being kept in a cave, and he's trying to use this as a power play to endear himself to get better perks and not be trapped in that cage, Taryn, on the other hand, ultimately falls for Colin first. And then when Colin uses Taryn to get off as nothing more than a toy, Taryn lets him go, saying that Colin broke his heart, broke his desire, and stuff like that. And to the point where when they're sitting in front of Colin's parents' house, Taryn says, "If you ever wanted to come back, no strings attached, you can come back and we can have sex. I'm not going to keep you captive. If you want to, swing by, you can always visit. You don't have to." So it's very much Taryn's the one's in love here, despite him being the captor, not the captive who would normally fall for the Stockholm Syndrome thing. I'm still calling it Stockholm Syndrome because they do end up falling in love, and I think that is largely due to the fact that Colin was captive for the entire fucking time of it, basically. And then the theme of abduction, forced proximity as a means to get to love, Colin is kept in a cage, and then a collar, and then a chain, and then is restricted to Taryn's house in the woods, and it's a very secluded setting. They even mentioned the fact that it's very similar to the book Misery, by Stephen King, and I thought that was a nice nod to hey, this would be Misery if it wasn't for this, that, or the other, And then they share some familial trauma. Colin was raised by his grandparents, and his parents did not care until he was quote unquote useful. His parents being the ones to push him to become a doctor because they thought, oh, that's a lucrative career. This is what we want. Make do what the family wants. Whatever the family wants, the family gets. Stuff like that. So he was raised by his grandparents, and he never really felt connected to his parents for that reason. So he's not really upset by leaving them behind. And then Taran lost his father during a flood and some looters, and then he saw how the government did nothing to help his family after the flood, and so he lost everyone as well. So it is definitely a bonding moment for them when they start sharing their past and their trauma that they went through, and finding love in each other. But the tropes, I think this book, if I can replicate this book in other forms, I would love to. And I have not yet found another book that does these kind of tropes well. But I do have some recommendations at the end, so stay tuned for those. But let's go through some rankings first. So we'll go through the plot, the characters, the writing style, some spicy scenes, and just my overall thoughts on the book as well. The plot, I would give it 4.5 stars. Again, it is Stockholm Syndrome. It is a darker story, but I enjoy the darker stories. I'm a villain lover. I love villains. If I could marry Ganondorf, I would. If I could marry Morrigan from Dragon Quest and let him win, I would. If I could have Giovanni capture me and turn me into a Team Rocket grinder or his Team Rocket toy, I fucking would. Like, I'm always on the villain sides. I like not just villain redemption stories, which is kind of what this is as well, but I'm a big bad boy guy. I love villains. I love bad boys. I love, like vigilante heroes, heroes that aren't goody two shoes, While I do love the soppy romances, as you can tell by my last review that I did on Football Sunday, there's definitely something to be said about darker romances and darker stories as well. So as the characters go, 5 stars. Colin is reasonable and logical, and he has good ideas on how to escape and what he can do to endear himself to Taran, and kind of the plot point from there. Taran, sweet baby angel, I fucking love him. He is so good in terms of he just wants to live a quiet life. He does kill somebody, but we learned that he killed somebody because they were trying to take the land from him, and he's really into doomsday prepping, and this was land that was inherited to him, that it was left for him by his uncle, and so, he is not a murderer because he wants to be. He was a murderer because he had no other option. The writing style, anything from K.A. Merikan is great, in my opinion. I've read some of their books, and I loved all of them. I've read, obviously, all of their books, so they may have a dud in there. But for this book, the writing style is 4.5 stars for sure. I enjoyed this immensely. It's graphic and descriptive, and the environments and the emotions and the sex scenes, and it's great. Speaking of spicy sex scenes, full 5 stars. These guys go at it like rabbits, and I love that. I did find it was interesting that they pulled the Colin using Taran like Taran was using Colin in the beginning. Like, Taran in the first shower scene, while Colin might be trying to endear him, Taran's just getting his rocks off. And then that's exactly what the turnaround was with Colin at the end. Is just he's just getting his rocks off, but with more emotional weight behind it, because they now have fallen for each other, or at least, unbeknowingly, Colin has fallen for Taran, and Taran has obviously fallen for Colin. So it's definitely a solid read. So overall, this is a 5-star for me. If I could read this for the first time again, I would love to. Just like some anime that I would love to rewatch, and some shows, Looking at You, Haunting of Hill House. If I could rewatch those shows and reread this book for the first time, hell, I would even want to reread Where the Devil Says Goodnight for the first time, because I love it so much. The writing style, the plot, the characters, the world that they've set in. Again, these two might be predicting the future with the apocalypse that happens that they require the bunker for, but all in all, absolutely phenomenal, absolutely wonderful. I cannot recommend this book enough, because if you like the darker side of fiction, like the darker side of fiction, you will thoroughly enjoy this one. So as far as recommendations go, it was a little bit harder to get some recommendations for something this dark, so I've picked something that I thought is on the same level of dark, which is Handled by Romilly King. I am not sure if I'm butchering that, but I'm hoping I'm not. It is a romance, obviously, but it's one that involves more serial killers, and one handling a serial killer and one to witness it. And, it's a different alternative universe. For example, serial killers think it all goes south. They finally get caught that their swan song is a day in court, making the families relieve their agony while they get off on that delicious pain all over again. Not happening, not anymore. We're not making celebrities out of monsters. We're not giving them a stage to strut on. Now they get an audience of two. One to handle the problem, one to witness it. I am a witness, trained for 6 years to do my duty, to manage the contracted killer, and watch justice be done. I knew it would be hard the first time to watch an eye for an eye moment. I expected to feel a lot of things: fear, disgust, guilt. I didn't expect to feel turned on. I didn't expect my contract killer to look quite pretty with blood on his hands. So it's definitely like serial killers, Dexter style killing serial killers, but with a witness to be there for the serial killing. So it's dark serial killer romance. It's quite good. It's definitely a dark gay romance, as the book title covers. The other one is a lot lighter, but because this book, Wrong Way Home, had some BDSM themes with a cage, with a collar, I thought, why not lead into the BDM story, you know? And this is a straight to gay one as well. It's a first time romance. So this is by Charlotte Storm. This is a solid read as well. It's definitely shorter than Wrong Way Home, but it's, I would say, enjoyable. It's more fluff and slight BDSM, but I enjoyed it. It's about graduating college student Ada Montgomery, and then the dad is Griffin Hart, is his best friend's dad. Griffin is gay, Aiden is straight, and, you know, Griffin is everything Aiden secretly fantasizes about. Secret because no one can know he longs to submit to a man who can take control, who can take Aiden across the threshold he so desperately wants to crawl across on his hands and knees. So it's definitely a BDSM story, and it's a solid one as well. So I'll probably be reviewing some of these books in the future. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you wanted to leave me a like, comment, or subscribe, I would really appreciate it. Share the word with your friends. If you guys love books, let me know what books you want me to read or want me to cover, and I'll see if I can make that happen. Let me know if you have any suggestions on what I can do on this channel. Again, I'm fairly new at this. I don't have a lot of time for editing, for, you know, production value, stuff like that. So this is just me kind of ramble thoughts about these books. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I'll see you guys next Sunday for the next installment. Have a good one.